What's up YouTube, Saf here on Super Saf TV, and in this video I'm going to be comparing the specs of the Samsung Galaxy S4 to the HTC One. Now obviously these are two of the biggest players in the Android smartphone lineup of 2013, and I know a lot of people will be in a position to decide which one of these to go for. So I thought in my usual style, let me put these devices head to head and compare the specs to give you guys a better idea of the key differences between these two devices. So let's look at the size initially. The S4 is slightly smaller in terms of height, but slightly wider, but also thinner than the HTC One. But generally speaking, they're quite similar in terms of size. The S4 is about 1.4 millimeters thinner than the HTC One. Now, the screen size, this is interesting because the screen size of the S4 is 4.99 inches, almost 5 inches, whereas the HTC One 4.7 inches. So although they're very similar in terms of the physical size, the Samsung Galaxy S4 does have a larger screen by 0.3 inches actually. So that is very interesting. They've gone for a very small bezel on the Samsung Galaxy S4, so you are going to get a larger screen on here. Resolution wise, both have a 1080p display, 1920 by 1080p pixels. 1080p videos are going to look exceptional on both of these devices. The HTC One, however, has a higher pixel density, so we've got more pixels per inch. Obviously it's got a smaller screen with the same resolution, so 468 ppi on the HTC One. The Galaxy S4 has 441 ppi. At that level, I very much doubt you're going to see a huge deal of difference in terms of that density, but the HTC One does have a slightly higher density, but at the expense of a smaller screen. Now in terms of weight, the S4 130 grams, the HTC One 143 grams, so the S4 is slightly lighter, but that's probably because the HTC One is a curved aluminium unibody, so you've got a more of a premium build there. The S4 polycarbonate body, now it's very similar to in terms of look to the S3, so you know, in terms of the design, it's very similar. I know a lot of people have been disappointed about that, and the material that they're using now is, they're saying it's stronger than the plastic that was used on the S3, but then again, does it feel premium? From what I've, from the experiences that people have told me, that the HTC One does feel a lot more premium than the S4. What's inside these devices? In terms of the processors, the S4 has an Exynos 5 octa processor. That's 8 cores altogether. That's 4 cores at 1.6 gigahertz Cortex A15 and another 4 at 1.2 gigahertz Cortex A7. So you've got the smaller cores that are going to be working for your general tasks, and then when you're doing gaming and things more powerful, intensive tasks, then the other larger cores are going to kick in. You've also got, apparently there's going to be another version which is going to be a quad core 1.9 gigahertz Crate version. As with the S3, they had the different variants. HTC One quad core 1.7 gigahertz Crate processor. Now obviously because of the octa-core, the S4 is going to have a more of an advantage here, but obviously benchmarks will tell us exactly how much of an advantage it has. Internal memory, the S4 has the 16, 32 and 64 gigabyte variants. HTC One has 32 and 64 gigabyte variants. Now the S4 however does have expandable storage up to 64 gigabytes. HTC One does not have a memory card slot, so you're not going to be able to expand that storage. So even if you want to go for the 16 gigabyte S4 version, you get a 64 gigabyte card. You're going to have a lot more storage than the 64 gigabyte version of the HTC One as well. So expandable storage is obviously very useful. RAM, both have 2 gigabytes of RAM, pretty standard these days. Camera, the S4 has a 13 megapixel camera. The HTC One, now they went for a 4 megapixel camera, but they're saying it's an ultra pixel camera, and it's got a third sensor size which captures what they're saying 300% more light. So they're talking more about quality rather than the size of the image. Megapixels is the size of the image, so they're saying because of the larger sensor compared to the traditional sensors out there, you're going to be getting high quality images. Obviously side-by-side comparisons will show us the differences between the quality of the two cameras. In terms of the additional features, HTC has HTC Zoe, which is going to give you lots of you can take lots of images at one time and pick your image later. S4 has a similar feature, drama shot they're calling it, but it's also got a dual camera feature. Now this is going to let you take pictures and videos using both cameras, so you can sort of place yourself in the picture like a square, which will add yourself into the picture. I think this will be quite useful for video especially. You've also got an eraser option, so you can sort of go in and erase bits from or people from images as well. And you've also got pictures with sound. Now, I've said this before, I don't really get why you'd have pictures with sound. Why not just use a video instead? But anyway, that's what they've got on here. Both of these devices will film 1080p at 30 frames a second from the front, from the rear-facing camera. Also, with the front-facing camera, you're going to get 1080p at 30 frames a second. The S4 has a 2 megapixel camera, whereas the HTC One has a 2.1 megapixel camera. So pretty similar there. Operating system, obviously both are on Android. The S4 Android Jelly Bean 4.2.2, so it's got the latest version. The HTC One has Android version 4.1.2. Now obviously this may be upgradable later on. S4 has TouchWiz UI, the Samsung TouchWiz UI skin. The HTC One has HTC Sense with HTC Blink Feed. Now this is more like tiles that you're going to have on there, live tiles, you know, social media, news, etc. So that's going to be quite useful. But obviously it's going to be a personal preference of which interface you prefer. I really like the Samsung interface. I like a lot of the features, multi-window, etc. They're very, very useful, I think, on the Samsung devices. But obviously, again, it comes down to personal preference. Battery, the S4 has a lithium-ion 2600 milliamp battery, which is removable, by the way. The HTC One, a lithium polymer 2300 milliamp battery. So you've got more capacity of a battery on the S4. Obviously it's got a larger screen though, so it might take up a little bit more battery. Generally speaking, they're quite similar, but the advantage obviously is that the S4 has a removable battery. The HTC One battery is non-removable, so that's one thing to bear in mind. Quickly touching on the other features, there's obviously a lot of other features, but sort of touching on the key features. The S4 Smart Scroll, it's going to use your eye tracking to sort of scroll down. You can also tilt the screen to scroll as well. You've got Smart Pause. If you look away from the screen, if you're watching a video, it's going to pause the video automatically. You've got S Translator, which is going to do live translations from text to speech, from speech to text as well. And you've got air gestures, which is really, really useful because you can just sort of hover your finger over different options and get sort of menu expansions, etc. Just like the Note before actually touching down onto the device. The HTC One has a dual frontal stereo speakers with built-in amplifiers. They're calling it HTC Boom Sound, which is going to give you sharper, richer and louder sound, they're saying. And both of these devices have infrared, so you've got infrared remote controls that you can use both of these devices as. In terms of price, both are similarly priced. You're going to be looking at around about £500 to £550 here in the UK. In the US, between $700 to $750. Now, this is for the SIM-free handsets. Obviously, different carriers will be pricing them differently in terms of the contracts, but this is for the SIM-only handsets. Similar prices, the premium price there you've got for these handsets. And those are some of the key differences in spec between these two. Both seem like really, really great phones, and both have their advantages and disadvantages. I think it really comes down to personal preference. What are your views on it? Which one would you go for? Do drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And once again, if we do get these devices in, as usual, we'll be doing side-by-side hands-on comparisons. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. It really does help me out. Why not subscribe to this channel? I've got plenty more videos coming up on here. Thank you for watching once again. This is Saf on Super Saf TV, and I'll see you next time.